Thanks, Debbie. So do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about Cardiff Women's Aid and what you guys do?
So Cardiff Women's Aid was the first women's aid to provide refuge in Cardiff and Wales, and we are a women's equality organisation. So currently we hold a contract for Cardiff where we respond to any violence against women, domestic abuse or sexual violence. And we provide a 24-hour hotline for them, helpline. We provide crisis workers to work with women individually and their children, and refuge and accommodation. So if they need to kind of exit where they're currently living, we provide them emergency accommodation, and then also then help them to move on into more permanent accommodation. We also have a children's team which work with children, both children that come from domestic abuse situations, but also we work with kind of children on parent violence as well, and do quite a fantastic project called Break for Change, which we run in partnership with other organisations across Wales to kind of try and increase or decrease violence on parents really, and increase that sort of bond between parents and reduce the violence in the future.
Wow, busy. So how did you become Chief Executive of Cardiff Women's Aid?
So I actually, I always say this, that I don't quite know how I got here. I'm sure lots of chief execs say that. Do you know what I mean? So I started as, very much on the ground. Really, my background was in sort of working with children and children's rights, and spent a lot of time working with victims of trafficking and exploitation. And then because I've just spent my whole life in this sector, and obviously I have a passion. So that passion turns into you then, making sure that you're doing the job the best you can, then you progress. And so suddenly I became CEO. But really, for Cardiff Women's Aid, I think I moved to Wales, and then the job opened, and I saw this opportunity, and I'd kind of moved out and worked in another organisation that wasn't working so well for me in terms I didn't really believe in it so much. So it was great to come back to kind of the women's rights, children's rights sector. And I'm really, it's been, I've been here for just over a year now. So it's been really great.
Yeah, fab. Okay, thank you. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned since you've become Chief Executive of Cardiff Women's Aid?
So it's been a really difficult time. So I became Chief Executive just kind of during COVID. So it's been really interesting for me to kind of come, when I joined, we were all working online. And I suppose for me, the biggest lesson for me recently has been, one, how important, building relationships, and in this sector, creating that bond. So coming back to the office has been really important for lots of people. We have tried to keep hybrid working, but I think that's been a biggest lesson. And also just for me, it's just, how it's a constant, there's always something to deal with, right? It's constantly having to deal with something and keep pushing forward, but ultimately it'll be fine. Everything's fine. You have to just keep going. And there's some really passionate, committed people out there, which makes this sector, such a wonderful sector to work in.
Yeah. And, I think everyone's, been the same, struggled with the COVID, that particularly when you start within a new business and you haven't had that face-to-face and you haven't built those relationships, it's a big task for people to build those relationships without seeing people in person. So
yeah, absolutely.
So you've touched on it slightly then in terms of, your earlier career, in terms of you've done some type of victims of trafficking, exploitation, that sort of thing. So how did you first become involved in the charity sector?
So I've always worked kind of in the third sector. So back to when, I studied, the degrees I studied was kind of community drama, theatre and television, and then theatre and media for international development. So straight from those, I was doing projects like in communities, like globally. And then I kind of started up my own business, doing projects around the world, really sort of participatory arts and community projects. And then, to be honest, I got a bit lonely. I was quite young, and lots of time people weren't taking me seriously because I was so young. So then I joined ECPAT, which was the organisation I first worked with. I worked there for 14 years. You see, I joined them as the community trainer. Then I started the youth programme. And so, from then on, I worked my way up there from being, like I said, a frontline youth worker to trainer to the CEO, interim CEO there eventually. For me, it's just, I don't think I'd ever work out of this sector. I've had opportunities, in this market, you get headhunted all the time with these massive salaries. I'm often tempted, but I just wouldn't. I just think I have to be somewhere where I really feel that you're making an impact, like a social impact. So
yeah, absolutely. So You talked about maybe not leaving the sector. So what do there's lots going on at the minute. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the sector currently?
I think for us, the rising cost of living and salaries. So one of the things that I really struggle with at the moment, that we struggle with, and it's not just our organisation, this sector, is keep retaining good staff, because we just can't pay them the salaries that they deserve. And so we really struggle at the moment with recruitment and also just paying our staff, for the rise in cost of living. And also then what's happening is that squeezing also on the women and children that we support, right? So the referrals are increasing, our staff are decreasing. So that's the challenge, I think, is just keeping, and also in this, when everything gets squeezed, it's keeping women's quality and violence against women on the map, because the things quite easily drop off when budgets start being squeezed. And so for us, it's not just supporting the women, but making sure that we're the voice for those, and that it's really kept firmly as a priority that needs to be dealt with, which is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I suppose from talking about budgets and how they're so squeezed and the cost of living crisis and that one end of the scale, talking about now the other. So what are you most excited about the future of the sector, or maybe what's going on within Cardiff Women's Aid?
For me, I think it's a really exciting time. For Cardiff Women's Aid, we've been for a lot of change. And one of the things I've been really trying to prove is that to be a feminist leader, you can be kind and inclusive, and you don't have to come in shouting at everybody. And I really think that we're really changing the culture here, evolving the culture. I would say we had some great people working for us, but just to a place where, because work isn't just about coming to earn money. So it's a really exciting time to be well, actually, although, and again, this goes back to the first question about cost of living and pay, it's that people don't come to work just for their pay. So we're trying to create an environment which is fun and inclusive, and people enjoy coming to work. They're inspired by being at work. So that's a quite exciting time for Cardiff Women's Aid. And I would say generally, the last few years, violence against women has started to be noticed a bit more. So that's quite exciting that, there's now, we're opening the eyes and the ears of people of influence, and now we need to kind of really press forward with the messaging and making sure that that's kind of sustainable.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So if anyone joining or thinking about joining the sector, obviously it's challenging. You've talked a lot about passion, people you've got to be passionate, you've got to believe in it. So what would be your top 3 tips for anybody wanting to or thinking about joining the charity sector?
So I would say that the charity sector, especially our organisations like ours, are very values driven. So I would say, because at the moment we're recruiting people based on value, even if they haven't got experience necessarily, it's if they can demonstrate the values, that's really important, because that's what this sector is about. I would say look for somewhere also where you're not going to get paid well, to recognise that, but look for somewhere where you're going to get that support. I think it's really important in that sector that you when you join an organisation, you make sure that you're getting the clinical supervision, the kind of therapeutic support if you need it. So that's something that I would say to look out for. And the other thing that I'd advise people as well as that is just making sure that you look after yourself, because I've seen so many people burn out, really great people that are very, do their best and their best and their best, but eventually, they burn out because it's just so much. And I think anywhere in the third sector, when you're working with people, especially people that are disadvantaged, is that it gets to you after a while. And it's a shame, because then we lose people, right? We lose people to the sector. So I would say making sure that you're really good at being boundaried, about looking after yourself, coming in, because then you'll have a longer career in the sector.
Yeah, fab. Yeah, that makes sense. And that is a tough one. I know people in the sector as well that have, they throw everything into it. And the reason they're in the sector is because they care. But then, like you said, it's just where's the boundary and kind of being able to walk away and have a life outside of it as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. So now you're chief executive of a really kind of well-known organisation here in South Wales, Cardiff Women's Aid. What advice would you give your younger self, just knowing what you know now?
I would say, knowing what I know now, I still don't feel. I think I still suffer from imposter syndrome slightly, but I would say that you can really achieve anything. Do you know what I mean? I think that I come from working class background, and there's definitely doors that I thought were shut to me, and I would just say never be afraid to it sounds really corny, but follow your dreams, and there's different routes always to get there. You think, and often you're told, society makes us think that there's one route. And I've discovered later on that I'm really dyslexic, and so that academic route was for me was really challenging. But I've gained lots of skills by doing things like like I rode the Atlantic, or done, and that's opened up my eyes to be like, there's always different routes to get somewhere. And so don't let other people define who you are and how you should achieve something. You always find a way. If you've got some focus and decide you want to be somewhere, then you can always find a way. That doesn't necessarily have to be the pre-described routes to get there. And that's definitely what I would tell my younger self, and also what I'm trying to do with my daughter, and with people here, the younger junior staff here. I always say to them, I have often had people come to me saying, well, I don't think, there's jobs open up. And I've been like, why haven't you thought about applying that? Oh, I didn't think that would be for me. And I'm like, is that what you want to do? And they're like, oh, well, then, get yourself there. Like, do you know what I mean? Just go for it, and just, don't let things hold you back.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. That's great advice. And I think I probably could have learned from some of that. I'd probably say exactly the same advice to myself going back years ago as well. So that's great. Thanks, Debbie. And that was it for questions.
Great. Oh, thank you so much. See you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.